And this leads me talking about complexity and different, complicating what you're saying. That leads me to principle number 2, which is my suggestion is to use strong verbs. And you've already seen some of that in the computation example: boost, make, fight, right? But the way to do that sometimes is to look at what we call nominalizations. So let me tell you what nominalizations are. They're basically just nouns or verbs that are made into nouns. So you take something like conclude, analyze, explain, or assess, you add an ending to it, and you end up having conclusion, analysis, explanation, assessment, right? Pretty simple. Nothing wrong with that, because sometimes we need the noun assessment, we need the noun explanation. But in many cases, if our sentence is about something or somebody doing an assessment, and we don't use the verb assess, it's going to be hard to understand what actually is happening. What is the action? So nominalizations hide action. And for example, phrases like, and this is just a simple explanation, phrases like make a decision is really decide. Offer a suggestion, suggest. You're saving 2 words. So if you're in the business of saving words, which you usually are when you're publishing because you have a limited amount of words, this is a really great principle to use. There's some more complicated phrases like conduct a careful examination of, scrutinize, just some examples to illustrate what nominalizations mean. So let me give you an example that I work with some folks from a medical system. So one tip that I like to give folks or suggest to start looking for nominalizations in your own writing is to look for off, the preposition off. Now, doesn't mean that every preposition off will have a nominalization attached to it, but often they are. So here this example is, this is actually from an article. MSGs offer considerable potential for the discovery of and for the management of. And I'm like, well, who's doing the discovery and the managing? Like, it's hidden in the noun. So the better way to say this is MSGs offer considerable potential to discover. And you could even say MSGs could discover mechanisms, right? So there's other ways to narrow this down further by focusing on what's the action being described here, namely MSG, that they can discover and they can manage the disease. Okay, I have more examples. There is another one. This comes from a social work article. So here the issue is, if you look for, let me see, the impact of, right? That's sort of we look for the of, the impact of. So something is impacting something. So rather than saying the impact of this on that, let's focus on the something, the child maltreatment, having an impact on something. So here's the revision. So the majority of the research, I kept the first part the same, but has investigated, rather than saying the impact of this, has investigated how child maltreatment impacts youth before the age of 12 and as to delinquency, right? So it's a lot clearer who is doing what. Even if it's abstract, because maltreatment impact, it's not something that's actually sort of happening, like me kicking the ball or me hitting the wall or something like that. It's an abstract event, but it's still focused on active verb. Here's another one, and this, let me see what this is from. Oh, this is from, I worked with the, CAPC is the, what's the C stand for? Of Advanced Palliative Care, the Center for Advanced Palliative Care in New York. I did some work with them in December on clear writing. So, and these are all great writers and have written their entire lives, and they're still asked you to come in and do some work with them. So I was very privileged a bit. This comes from one of the state issue briefs. This has been published, and it's actually well written, but it still has, if you look here, you have some nominalizations here and some passive expressions where the actual action is being hidden. This one is a little harder to detect because you don't have an off there, right? But if you look at despite high healthcare utilization and spending, among those with serious illness, well, so these are obviously utilizing and spending. So why don't we write it that way? The same thing is, if you look at the second one, this population receives this care is characterized by. So what is characterizing? It's all these things in the passive there. And it's, again, this nominalized version. So here is my revision, which is a little longer, because usually when you take those out, you shorten the sentences, but sometimes they get a little longer. That's unusual, but it can happen. But it clarifies what's really happening. So even though individuals with serious illness heavily utilize healthcare and spend a significant amount, blah, 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 the symptoms are often inadequately treated, they experience poor communication, and their family members face enormous strains, right? So the focus here is really on the action, what's happening, who is doing what. So rather than saying a sentence like, there is a kicking action taking place between Tom and John, you say Tom kicks John, right? But not there is a kicking action taking place. That's the sort of nominalized abstraction that academic and scientific writing is culpable, is real guilty of. And it doesn't, and I think it has led to the fact that what you were describing, Golana, like you got to read a sentence like 4 times before you even can figure out what the heck it is saying. And it shouldn't be that way, right? Any thoughts, questions so far? Because I'm going to do some practice now. Does it make sense to you with the nominalization? So it's really when you make, when the nouns carry meaning of an action and they're nouns, you're cheating your reader out of fully understanding what you're trying to say. So use verbs, actors, and verbs. And this is something I have to do all the time. And, and I'm like, I was revising the other day. I actually submitted a manuscript for a textbook with a colleague of mine. And we're in the revision process. I haven't gotten feedback from the editor yet because we're in the midst of splitting up the whole volume. Anyway, long story short, I just looked at it the other day because I wanted to use a passage in there for something else or, some of the citation. And I looked back at it and I found like 2 nominalizations. And I'm like, I was horrified, right? So it happens. But that's, the goal, like this constant revision. And so I'm sure as hell took them out now. So I'm going to, when it actually gets published, they're not going to be in there. There might be others that I didn't catch, but at least those 2. So let's look at these sentences here. And I'm actually going to go to the next slide. We're going to go sentence by sentence. Each preparation of the solution is done twice. Typical sentence for method section. It's maybe not even necessarily change it, but for the use of practice, what really is, what's the action that's taking place here that's kind of hidden in a noun?
Prepared.
That's right. So we got to look for prepare. So how would you revise this? Anyone?
Each solution is prepared twice.
Yes, you could do that. Absolutely. Anybody else? Any other thoughts? You want to make it more active? You have to invent sort of a subject.
Yeah, we prepared the solution twice.
Yeah, or each solution twice, or the solution twice. Absolutely, each solution prepared twice. Absolutely. So, so either one of these is fine. There is a slight difference. It could be each preparation is done twice, or is it 2 solutions, 1 solution? We don't really quite know. And so, but you would know if this were your own writing, right? So sometimes these nominalized phrases can even hide the accuracy of your meaning as well. So, but preparation of, it should be either is prepared or we prepared, depending on, again, I'm a big fan of active voice. So I always, I always like the act. I prefer the active, but sometimes this is the better version, depending on what comes before and after, right? So it depends on sentence flow, paragraph flow as well. Very good. Next one. Here we go. Now we go. Consideration should be given to an acquisition of these properties. What are the nominalizations here that we should change? If you want to mark them, I think you have access to the screen. You can mark it as well if you want to annotate. Go ahead. Acquisition, bravo, consideration. Yay, there's somebody, excellent. You can use the text version. If you click on the annotation and click on text, you can type something on the slide. Anybody have a thought on how to, that's right, acquisition, consideration, that's it. Very good. I love this annotation feature. This is so much fun. Anybody want to give it a shot to rewrite it? Rephrase it? And you might have to invent somebody, an actor here who's doing consideration and acquisition, right? Because it's not here. So be creative. You're like, okay, I don't know what to say. Something there. We should consider. Very good.
How to acquire.
We should consider to acquire. Absolutely. So I think it's, you're on the right track. Here's what I have come up with. We should consider, right, acquiring these properties, or if you know who the entity is, the University of Maryland, Baltimore, or, whatever, Henry Silverman should consider acquiring these properties, or should acquire. You can even take the consider out. You could say we should acquire these properties, right? But if you want to emphasize that there is a process, considering, fine, you can do that. It's really, and again, it depends on the larger context the sentence is in. Sometimes you can take consider out, sometimes it needs to be there because it makes more sense within your narrative. They will also be involved in abstract development, workshop facilitation, and presentation regarding the analysis and interpretation of the data. So you guys go ahead, annotate, mark things, write up things, use the text box if you want to write something up. It's easier to do than using your mouse, I have found. Abstract development, yep. The development, facilitation, I know. Usually something with ION or ENT at the end, yep. Those are the ones. So when we make them verbs, what changes the sentence? You can also cross things out in a sentence however you like or type it up. Anybody have an idea of how to rephrase this or make, so you have these nominalizations. How do you make them into verbs and how does it change the sentence?
They will develop abstracts.
Yes.
Facilitate workshops.
Yes.
And make workshops and presentations. Presentation, yeah. This is would be the same.
Yeah. You can use present as a noun. So, develop, facilitate, and present. Present maybe information on analysis. You're right. The last piece is a little different. And presentations regarding, it's also like, and you could even say they will develop abstracts and facilitate workshops on analysis and interpretation of data.
Analysis.
Yeah. You could
and
almost
present analysis and interpretation.
Yes, present analysis and interpretation of data. Or you could even do this. Let me see. I have my revision right here. I'll show you. Like every time I look at this, I have a. So they will also develop abstracts, just what you were saying. But you could also facilitate workshops, and give presentations. So I kept the presentation alive, but I used give presentations. But I like your present about analyzing, interpreting data much better. And then the question would be, and this would have to be as the author, you have the discretion. These workshops and presentations, are they the same? Are they connected? So you could, there might be somewhere, but if these are discrete actions, then you want to keep them separate. But there might be some connection there, just based on the content. Very good. Clearing all drawings. I think we have one more. This is one of my favorite principles in nominalization, because this is, I think, one of the most effective principles to take to your writing, because man, if you only do this, your writing will get so much clearer and direct, because you will also work on you will work on passive versus active automatically because of it, because you take a lot of passivity out when you focus on taking out nominalizations. So here is an example I actually gotten from Anne Green's, from this book here, Writing Science in Plain English. So take a look at this. I'm gonna enable the annotation here. So, the behavioral manifestations of stress responses have been shown to vary greatly between individuals and rodents, pigs, birds, fish, and humans. So, what's the action and who should be doing the action rather than the abstract subject we have here? And just FYI, all of the sentences we're looking at, they're grammatically correct. They're actually not even that badly written. It's just that they could be more effective in what they're communicating. So, go ahead. That's right. Something about behaving, right? Or even responding, right? Go ahead.
We can delete have been shown. We can say that the behavioral manifestation of stress varies greatly. That
would be a good first step to shorten the sentence. You're absolutely right. Have been shown to vary. You can just say vary greatly. That's a good first step to kind of take this out. So that's one possible edit. It still preserves the abstraction here, right? So, because who is really doing something here?
We can say audience, pigs, birds, fish.
Those are the folks. What do they do?
Behave differently in response to stress.
Yeah. Yes, or have different responses to stress. All of these are good suggestion. The main point is that you make these guys here, they are the actors, right? They should be doing the action. Let me see what I came up with, or what Anne Green had in her book. Individual rodents, pigs behave very differently in response to stress. So she focused on behave, but you could also say respond very differently to stress. But if the focus is on behavior, then behave is probably the better verb to use than respond. Again, all depends on, these are nuances of meaning that you will then have to determine. But the start is I like this first edition, like have been shown. It's, you know, have been shown to, I use the expression all the time, and it's one that I always have to look out for. Because sometimes I'm saying it's indirect. Sometimes I can't take, I don't take all of these out in my writing, but when I at least kind of go through it once and try to take many of these indirect expressions out, as many as I can, it improves the readability of